Thank you all very much for joining me on this afternoon. It's nice to be in Colorado Springs. Despite our name of World Trade Center Denver, I want to say that our official name when we started 31 years ago is the Rocky Mountain World Trade Center Association. So we serve companies throughout the state of Colorado, as well as some of the surrounding states in New Mexico, Wyoming, even Arizona, and a few in Nebraska. So we do try to take a regional approach. There are other World Trade Centers in the state of Utah and in Kansas, so we don't encroach onto those territories at all. But if there were ever a World Trade Center to pop up in one of the surrounding states of Colorado, we would certainly stick to our state of Colorado. But in the interim, we're trying to serve as many companies as we can. We are a nonprofit trade association, which is similar to a chamber of commerce, helping companies do international business. Now, that could be imports, that could be exports, that could be joint ventures with an international company, that could be managing global operations, staff, that could be e-commerce, a lot of different ways you can conduct global business. So have been asked to give kind of an overview, a 101, if you will, of international trade. Hopefully that's what you're understanding here as well, because I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Since we're a small group, I hope you'll make it interactive, because I would like to take your questions where I can, and where I can't, I'll punt that for a later time and email you the answer. So no one person can know everything about international business, that is for sure. It is a very complicated subject, much more complicated than doing business domestically. And there's new rules, a new game, there's a new stage when you're thinking globally. But one thing about international business is that it raises everybody's game. When you're competing on a global stage, you have to raise your game. And so what does that mean for American companies here? We need to innovate. If we're going to compete on the global stage, we need to keep our costs low, because many other places can produce things cheaper than we can because they have cheaper labor costs. So when you compete globally, it makes sure that you're competing at the most innovative state, because that's what U.S. companies, especially Colorado companies, are really great at, is using innovation to really be able to compete globally. So whether you're in a service sector, like maybe you've just designed an app, or you're doing education, because education is one of our strongest service exports out of the state. Or maybe you're in tourism. We can also count foreign visitors that come to the U.S. as a tourist, as a service export. So Colorado exports a number of different services as well as products. And I thought we'd get into that a little bit today and could answer questions about that. But most importantly, I want to teach you how to go about doing international business. So if you're going to start your own company, or if you're going to join a company that's already thinking of growing their market share somewhere, maybe they've tapped out the U.S. market, this will be a way to access other countries. So why might you pursue international trade? There's lots of different reasons. One of the best reasons is you like to travel, right? You've been on a cruise ship. I love to travel. And so starting an import business might be something of interest, where you travel and you end up buying things that you like, and then you end up buying more and more of those things, and you start selling those products here locally. The U.S. market is a strong one for selling imported items. Some would argue that we're the strongest market in the world, and we are for many cases. But I will tell you this, 95% of the world's population lives outside of the United States. And there is a startling statistic that I heard from the Secretary of Commerce a few years back, and I know it hasn't changed. Under 3% of US companies export today. Yet 95% of the opportunities outside the US. Do you think maybe that's why we have a trade deficit problem? That's why we've got a trade deficit problem, because we're importing more than we export. We're not exporting enough. We're not taking advantage of that global marketplace, which we should be, because it's 95% of the population and about 70+% of the purchasing power is outside of the United States. So the opportunity is elsewhere, but very few companies are really taking advantage of it. Now here's another stat, and it's important for this conference, the Minority Business Conference, because 46% of all entrepreneurs in the US are minority or women-owned. 60% of those companies are more likely to do international business than they are to do domestic. If you think of immigrant-owned businesses, they're already bringing a global mindset. They're already bringing global connections. And so we have a program at the World Trade Center now to teach immigrants and refugees how to trade from the United States, to keep them out of trouble and also to get them good prosperity and opportunity from the state of Colorado. So we welcome all of you to be part of the World Trade Center and to take our courses. We offer a series of courses, and we have a number of events that you might find interesting, just to learn from each other, because we're all about a peer-to-peer network of companies teaching other companies how to trade, because you'll learn bits and pieces along the way, and hopefully it'll make it easier for you. Let's go ahead and start, though. Why do you really want to start this global business? Think about it. Let's say you've got a product and you're at the end of a life cycle, maybe. Here in the US, it's penetrated. People have bought it on all coasts and throughout the heartland of the US. And so maybe you want to start selling it elsewhere to keep sales high, maybe throughout seasonal demand, or through if your life cycle's at the end and you're getting a 2.0 version. Here in the US, that's more popular. You could take the initial version and find a new market for it globally. Here's some other things. You want to increase your competitiveness. You want to get more market share. Your sales are low. I will tell you this, though. One thing that you don't want to do is take a short-term approach to global business. So let's say you have a bad month. The last thing you want to do is say, well, then let's start up global business this month. Because this is a long-term play. This is an expensive play. It's a risky play. It's a long-term play. And you need to make sure that you have management support, full commitment across the board of your company, because it could take some reorganization in your company. It could take learning all new rules, modifying your product, and a number of other things, which we're going to get into now. So I just wanted to say that it is a long-term strategy. It's very lucrative for many. You might think that most companies that do international business are large. That is not true. About 85% of the companies we work with and see doing global business from Colorado are in the small business category. And we'd love to help you get there. So these are some of the reasons why we see people doing international business, whether it's importing or exporting. Just want to talk to you about the impact. The impact is we sell about $22.5 billion in exports. And we probably 1 in 5 jobs in Colorado come about due to international trade. So whether you're manufacturing or a service sector, I mentioned the service sectors that are conducting international business could be engineering, architects, it could be IT, it could be education. When we teach international students, we're exporting education, we're exporting a service. Tourism, I mentioned a few others earlier. This is interesting that 42% of our sales, our exports, are going to one of 20 countries that we have a free trade agreement with. And so free trade agreements work toward getting tariffs down to 0 and make it much easier for goods and services to cross borders. And we also protect each other's intellectual property. We have dispute agreements in place. It just makes it much easier to conduct business across these markets. What's our most popular free trade agreement that we're in right now?
China.
Nope. I wish we had a free trade agreement with China. NAFTA. NAFTA is so crucial because the number 1 and number 2 largest markets for Colorado exports are Canada and Mexico by a mile. So don't forget those important neighboring markets within the NAFTA agreement if you're looking to start international business, because it's a really good opportunity for you to do so. Just wanted to say again, 4,959 companies in the small and mid-sized category are currently doing international business. We have about 5,500 exporters total in the state, but most of them are small to mid-sized businesses. Let me just share with you a little bit about the resources that are available to you. You might think that it's daunting and scary and risky to do global business, but there are so many resources at your disposal, especially if you're exporting. If you're exporting, there are various state agencies that want to see you succeed, and federal agencies. Here are some of them. We at the World Trade Center are a nonprofit. We're not government. We are here as your trainer, your coach, your consultant. Think of us as a network of other global businesses that you can learn from, because just like any chamber, we're doing tons of events for you to get to know other people maybe that are already succeeding in China, to learn from them. So that's what we do. The State Office of Economic Development is focusing on export promotion, and they're trying to help you sell your goods overseas. They're running trade missions around the world. They give grants for business development opportunities. So definitely look at the state. The Minority Business and Small Business Development Center and the World Trade Center are partnering on getting you trained to do international business. And so if you stop by our booth downstairs, you're going to see a training schedule that we have at the World Trade Center. We offer about 50 classes a year in person, and we have a bunch online. And so you can learn how to do international business from us, and you might even get the Minority Business to scholarship you in. It's called, it's through the Small Business Development Center, and what they're doing is they're helping to scholarship minority or women-owned businesses to take the programming that we offer and get certified in international business, which is something we've been doing at the World Trade Center for 31 years. So it's called the Leading Edge Grant. Take a look at that if you haven't already learned about it through Rosie downstairs at the Minority Business Office. Now, if you're in the agricultural sector, food sector, the Department of Agriculture also has a strong export promotion program that they help Colorado companies in those sectors try to succeed globally on the export side. And then on the federal area, there's the U.S. Export Assistance Center. They're part of the Department of Commerce, and they also do export promotion from the state. They have consultants that work with you based on an industry sector. So, and of course, the Small Business Administration, we all know them, but they also have this export financing arm. So they actually can help you get capital, working capital, to rework maybe your manufacturing plant or other types of investments that you need to make in order to make your product ready for export. So just some interesting resources there. I wanted to just share a few on the importing side for any of you that might want to explore an importing business. A very lucrative business, an importing business. So lots of agencies that you can work with, mostly on the federal front. Most state government agencies don't really want to help you import. It's not what they're about. We at the World Trade Center love importers, and so we have a lot of our training around importing. So we can certainly coach you and help you find new sources for those imports. But mostly you'll be working with Customs Border Protection, and their website is quite helpful. They have a whole importer's guide you can download to learn all of the nuances of importing. It's a lot of rule-based facts, but it's an interesting read nonetheless. Of course, foreign embassies and consulates might be able to help you identify sources. The World Trade Center can do that as well. The World Trade Center has 330 offices in 100 countries. So oftentimes we tap into some of our sister agencies and we say, do you have anybody sourcing in this area? So we can certainly connect you. You can see some of the other federal agencies that you can work with there. So what I wanted to do today is just kind of give you a broad brush stroke. Hopefully none of you thought you could come into this 1-hour session and learn everything you needed to know about trade, because we actually teach an entire year on trade and we still don't get to everything. So it's a complicated subject, but I thought I would just give you a broad brush stroke on some of the steps of global business, whether you're exporting or importing. Let's get into step 1, developing a strategy. So, even if you were to sell a product into a new market, like you were going to, let's say, sell to California, your product that you made here in Colorado, you'd need to do a little bit of research, right? And how do you know that California is the best state for you to start selling your product in? Well, you ask yourself, what's my story? What's my story as a company? What's my value prop as a product? Why is this widget going to sell well in Colorado, and why will it sell even better maybe in California? You need to ask yourself, what's the story behind your product? That's your value proposition. I can't stress this enough. 80% of companies get this wrong. 80% of companies that we see follow a sale. They met a guy at a trade show. They had beers after the trade show. They thought he'd be a great distributor, and they gave him exclusivity for the market to sell their goods. That is not the way to necessarily select a market. It might sound obvious when you hear it that way, but I'll tell you, 80% of companies chase the sale. They got a hit on the website, so now they find themselves deep in Russia, selling a product that doesn't even make sense in Russia. I'll give you an example of that. One of our instructors used this as an example. Campbell's Soup. They sell soup, right? No, they sell convenience. That's their value prop. They have a convenient product that you can heat up and have semblance of a dinner in a matter of less than 5 minutes, right? So it's great for working parents. In Russia, the idea of making soup is a family affair. It happens all day. You have all the people around the kitchen. It is not about convenience. It's about family gathering. So is that a good market for them? Well, they eat a lot of soup there, but that value prop doesn't match. And so it's important to take that value prop and make sure it translates well to the market that you select. And we can help you do that at the World Trade Center. We can help you do the research and find the markets that might be best suited for your product or service. If you're importing, this might be obvious. Do you understand your product? What I mean by that is, do you really understand your product? Do you really understand where you're buying it from? You might be buying a product that you think is made in China at this facility, but in fact, they might just be brokering the product from somewhere else. And it's really important for you to know exactly where your product, even if their components, are coming from. And we'll get into why later, but knowing that if you're buying, let's say, sweaters from a factory in China, make sure that they have sewing machines on site. Go visit. That brokering of product happens worldwide. And it's important to know the point of origin of your imports. And I'll explain that a little bit later. But you also need to know, do I need any sort of special permitting or licensing, or are there major tariffs that are tagged to this product? So if I brought it from this country into the US, am I going to be hit with a huge fine and fee there? And so that's something you need to know. You need to know if there's quotas on these products. So maybe there's restrictions on products that we can bring in, an amount of restriction that we can bring in. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But most importantly, just like if you were going to set up a new office in California, you have to build a plan. You have to have a full business. It has to model your business plan. It has to be strategic in nature. It's got to bring your business forward. It even is more important when you go global. So whether you're going to import or export, you need to do a plan, and it needs to follow right along with your business plan. Because if it doesn't, it's not going to be a sustainable long-term play. Here are some of the elements that we see in a good export or import plan. You want to make sure that you do your international value proposition. Does it translate well? Does my story translate to the market I'm looking to do business in? What sort of market research have you done? Have you compared that research? Have you gone to the micro level of research? And we can help you with that at the World Trade Center. What sort of modifications do you need to make on your product? We're going to talk a little bit about that further, but there's lots of possible modifications. What's the regulatory environment, either there or here, that's going to impact your product or service? You're going to have to put a CE mark on all electronics in Europe. What other types of marks or regulatory hoops will you have to jump through just to get your product in the country? Tariff implications, I mentioned that. Pricing. How do you determine your price? We're going to talk a little bit about that today, but these are all some of the things that we refer to when we're talking about elements of a strategic plan. Obviously, intellectual property comes into play too, because your best asset is your intellectual property. So we'll have to think about how to protect yourselves from people copying your product or your service and infringing upon it. That's about what I'm going to do for each of these steps, so bear with me, it's going to be quick. So step 2 is market research. So this is where the World Trade Center can help, as well as the export-related government agencies I mentioned, the State Office of Economic Development, and the U.S. Export Assistance Center, which is the federal agency. We all subscribe to various trade databases to help you with statistics. Now that may seem boring to some, but it's actually really interesting to help you find your market. Matter of fact, we're looking at trends, past trends, and we also try to help you identify what are the micro level data indicators that would help you determine whether that market is good for you. For instance, if you're selling something that needs to stay refrigerated, you might want to make sure that you look at the power outages in that country, because they can't keep things refrigerated very reliably. So you've got to think about that sort of micro level data that would be impactful for your product or service in that market. So we can also help you analyze strategies that would work there. Google is not universal. Google's not even used in some countries. So you can't just say, well, they'll Google me. Social media changes with countries. Some don't use, Facebook. And so you need to really identify what are your marketing strategies to make an impact in a market. Some of you that have websites and say, well, of course I'm global. I have a website. Anybody can find me. Well, if your search engine optimization is not optimal globally, they won't find you. And so making sure that your search engine optimization is strong in the markets that you're seeking to expand to is important. Some methods that we try to teach. You can analyze those trade statistics that we can provide for you, but there's also other ways. You can keep apprised of world news. If you read about a huge coup going on in a market, it's probably not the most politically safe market for you to go into. It's risky. The best thing for global business is elimination of risk. So the more you can have a long-term strategy and know that a market is right for you and has a stable political and economic environment, it's probably a good space for you. There are some online trade tools. We've all heard of Alibaba, and I'll tell you that's like a Yellow Pages on steroids, and so you basically need to check and verify and do some due diligence on anybody you find on any of these sites, because anybody can list themselves on there. But remember, I mentioned it could be a broker of a broker. And so you want to really make sure that you do your due diligence, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Let's go into how do you find buyers and sellers. First off, you got to ask yourself, how do my customers purchase this good or service? Do they buy it at their local store? Do they buy it online? Do they buy it through distributors? How do they do it? So you've got to ask yourself, how much of a relationship do I want to have with the end user? How much control do I want to have on the branding and the positioning of where it is on the shelves, and what color is being used and what advertising is being used to sell my product? You've got to ask yourself all these questions, because the more you want, the more interaction you want with your customers, you're going to go to the right side here. The less you want, you're going to go to the left side here. So I will tell you, most companies do choose a distribution method. They hire a distributor in another market. And the main reason for that is, what do you think? They know the market, they speak the language, and they're in the right time zone, right? So if you have warranty issues or people wanting to bring back their product or ask questions about the product, they're in the right time zone and can talk to that distributor, or they can handle those customer service inquiries, right? When you're selling from the US, it's hard to do that in another market when you don't know how it's done, you don't know the connections. Distributors are used for that. What they do is they take acquisition of your goods and then they mark them up and sell it for that. The margin they've done to mark them up is their payment. It's a great way to make sales and sleep at night. So just consider distribution as a possible method. How might you find those distributors? So the U.S. Export Assistance Center offers something called the Gold Key Service. They're basically out there finding you distributors in a market. It's for a fee, but it's between $600 and $1,200, depending on how much work they do. But they can find you several distributors in your industry, in a market, and even set up meetings and vet them for you. It's a pretty great service that the government offers. So I would check that out. If you have a more detailed approach, there's other ways to find distributors. Trade shows are still an incredible way to find out who are leaders in the market. And so trade shows are something that we highly recommend, both domestically and internationally. If you go to a trade show in Las Vegas, you'll probably find who are the international players there. And then you'll get a sense for who you might be able to rely on in another market. So if you're looking for suppliers, if you're trying to find a source of products, you're going to want to go to online resources, but also there are buyer's agents that specialize only in China, if you want. If you know the sources in China, you want to get somebody to check it out for you, you can actually hire a buyer's agent, and we can connect you with some of those. So also trade associations and chambers of commerce could be helpful, as can the overseas offices of U.S. embassies. So just working with your commercial service office in the embassies or a World Trade Center around the world is a good way to go to find the right partners. I want to get into this modifying of the product, because this, again, goes back to that commitment level. Are you fully committed to do this for the long haul? Because these are some of the things you might have to modify in your product. Electrical standards. Most likely you will have to modify it, because everywhere in the world is different than here. Metric system. We don't use the metric system here. Almost everybody else does. So you'll want to change your packaging and your labeling to be reflective of the metric system. Labeling standards. You're going to want to maybe translate those into the market that you're doing business. Geographic weather conditions are things that you'll want to keep into consideration for your product or service. Is it going to make it there if I shipped it by boat? Can it withstand the climate that on the boat for the next 2 months? So those are some things that you might want to ask yourself. Local customs and branding. Did you know that in Europe they don't really like the flavor cinnamon? In the US it's pretty great. We love cinnamon. I love cinnamon. They hate it in Europe. So you've got to modify tastes, smells, colors, symbols on your packaging that might be offensive to other markets. Branding. What does your brand mean in their language? We've all heard of the Chevy Nova, no-go in Spanish, right? Didn't do very well in Spanish-speaking markets. But there are lots of other considerations for branding that you need to make sure that it translates well into the market you're going into. Labeling standards. I have this story where a woman imported thousands of ski hats from China and forgot to put in the label made in China. Forgot to specify that on the contract. So they got caught up in customs. She was every day was acquiring more fees for storage because they did not have the made in China label on them. So she had to go there and sew little made in China labels to get those out of customs. So knowing the labeling standards in the market you're bringing it from and the market you're bringing it to are critically important, because you don't want to be on the customs floor sewing in 1,000 little labels. So just important to note that. Logistics. So the good news about logistics is you can actually work with a third-party logistics provider, and they can help you. Those are called freight forwarders, customs brokers. We'll get to that in a minute. Here are some of the documents that you're going to need, and these are required for shipments. If you're going to ship by air, you need an airway bill. If you're going to ship by sea, you need a bill of lading. Between air and sea, which one do you think is more reliable? You might think air, especially if you're doing something that's, a small package or is perishable, because you want to get it there quickly, right? It is more reliable. But when airlines fill their planes, they do so first in this order: people's luggage, that includes their pets and any other things that they have in the belly of the plane. If they have more room, they'll put U.S. mail. And if they have more room, then they'll consider cargo. So while you might think that your cargo is getting on that belly of the plane, you may get bumped several flights. On the ship, it's much different. You solidify yourself in a container. Your freight forwarder can help you with that. You're sure to get on that boat. And so, interesting enough, cargo by ship may actually be more reliable if you're looking to get it on at a certain point in time. So just thought I'd share that. It's slower, much slower, but reliable was the question. So other things that you might need: certificate of origin. I mentioned that you really need to know the origin of your product, right? That certificate of origin will actually prove to the government this is where this originated. And that comes into play a little bit later when I get into compliance. Some of the other certificates are often used, but not required on every shipment, and they're on the right-hand side. Some products need a license. For instance, if you're going to sell some controlled items like weapons or some type of satellite, you might need licenses to get through that. This is something that you may not know. Outside of the US, we use all new different shipping terms. So you probably heard of FOB. It means something different internationally. So this is where US companies get tripped up, because most international companies know Incoterms and they use them domestically as well. So they're a leg up, and this is our most popular class that we teach at the World Trade Center. There are 11 different shipping terms. And what matters about here is one of these terms determines who's going to pay for the shipment if it falls, if you're good. Let's say you're getting your container is picked up off the loading dock, off the dock at the port, and it's lifted up onto the boat. It crosses over the railing of the boat, and then a big wind comes, and it comes back, and it drops. Based on which Incoterm your contract said, it will tell you, because it crossed over the rail of the ship once, even though it dropped on the other side of the rail, it's the buyer's responsibility, or it's the seller's responsibility. And I will tell you, there are a lot of things that do happen in transit. And so it's important to know who's paying for what, right? Because you could be out millions of dollars, thousands of dollars, if you don't know your Incoterm. And I can guarantee you your buyers know it, because they're all used to working in it. So we teach Incoterms. It's one of our most popular classes. It's technical, but it is definitely necessary. Probably the 3 most important letters in your contract. So most people don't even know that they exist. Here are some of the shipping and packing considerations. You've probably all seen these. They're universal symbols, but certainly you've got to make sure that you're shipping your products in a way that's going to keep them safe on the journey. And there's some marks that we can help you with and determine on your different shipments. These service providers, these are third-party logistics providers. They're basically travel agents for your freight. And so your freight forwarder is spending their whole career getting your freight from point A to B. That's what they do. And one good thing that they could do is consolidate your shipment with other shipments and share a container, so that you don't have to do that. So it's a great means to hire a freight forwarder. Customs brokers, on the other hand, handle your imports into this country. So let's say you give a customs broker a power of attorney, and you say, will you represent my company at customs and clear this through customs? They are knowledgeable of all the rules, all of the tariffs, how to determine tariffs, all the documentation, really fantastic partners for you to have. Most of us use couriers, which is FedEx, DHL, UPS, to sell things or buy things globally, right? If you've ordered something online, you've mostly got it from a FedEx or a UPS courier. These are more expensive, but they plan everything from your door to their door, so helpful for that means. But if you're shipping something over 50 kilos, I would definitely not use a courier because you're going to spend a lot of money on that. Instead, you could work with a freight forwarder or a customs broker to move that good. So know that those are options for you. Compliance. Some of you might say, oh, I don't want to hear about compliance. I will tell you this is the thing that trips up most companies. Most companies are not aware of the compliance laws, even in this country. And so it's important to know who cares about compliance, and that is it's the Homeland Security, mostly. Think Homeland Security thinks about compliance, especially in the Department of State. They are the most stringent compliance, they have the most stringent compliance rules. It's ITAR, International Traffic Arms Regulation. Many Colorado Springs firms are subject to ITAR regulations. These are defense-related companies. These are some companies in the satellite sector, but it's mostly for defense-related goods, right? So it's a very stringent trade compliance law, and there are many more teeth attached if you do it wrong. So we teach a class on ITAR, very helpful for firms trying to figure out how to become ITAR compliant. We get questions about this every day, so very popular thing to know about. But most goods that are commercial in nature, or even dual-use goods, so maybe they're night vision goggles that could be used for commercial or military, those are mostly covered under the Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry Security. That's called EAR, Export Administrative Regulations. That's most goods, not as stringent as ITAR, so we do actually teach probably more classes on compliance than we do anything else at the World Trade Center because it's so important. I will tell you that companies, if they get this wrong, if they get compliance wrong, they are subject to possibly millions of dollars in fines, jail time, and the ability and the loss of the ability to export. So, and there's import compliance laws as well. So what you really don't want to do is lose your ability to sell globally, because that could tank a company right there. You surely don't want to be in jail either. So we want to help you get these right. Department of Treasury are the ones that say we can or cannot do business in Libya, Cuba, Syria. They're the ones that make those embargo rules. I just wanted to share a couple little things with compliance. Very simple. There's something called the denied parties list. There are not only countries that we can't do business with, there are people we cannot do business with. And so the denied parties list lists those people. They might be on the no-fly list. They might be, drug traffickers. They may be identified from the U.S. government as just not having good business practices that we cannot do business with. So if you're caught doing business with some of the people that are on this list, you could actually get fined. And so important to have a compliance program that allows you to check that list against new distributors, new customers, because that's the kind of thing that you can get audited for, and we want to make sure you're protected. So I won't get into the rest of those. Customs border protection, they're focusing on imports. They're looking at making sure that what you're importing is going to be safe for the U.S. market. Homeland Security really cares about what's coming in to this country. Are we going to be safe? And so those are the agencies that are focusing on imports. There are all kinds of import controls. You even have agencies like the FDA and the EPA and others here in the U.S. that require that your goods go through a particular screening process, or they've met certain inspection certificates, and all of those are important to know before you start bringing them in. tariffs. We've all heard about tariffs lately with the president and his latest initiatives to raise tariffs on both steel and aluminum and about 10,000 other products. It's been a rocky year for tariffs, not really knowing what your tariff implications are going to be. We get calls daily at our help desk on how to identify the tariff that I'll be subject to on this new product. And things are changing again in March. So it's been changing on a kind of a monthly basis. So knowing what your tariff implications could be a make or break deal of whether or not you even import or if you want to bring, mostly if you bring products in is where we're charging the tariffs. But other countries are going to charge tariffs as well. So knowing the tariff schedule of your product is important. And the way you find out your tariff schedule, it's something called a harmonized tariff schedule number. Every product, this clicker, my phone, that chair, has a 6-digit harmonized tariff number that's attached to it. Kind of like a NAICS code, if you will, we were talking about earlier. But this is for product specific, right? It's a 6-digit code. But if you're going to export it from the US, you add another 4 digits, because it gets down to the color, the kind of battery that's inside. It's so specific, right? If you're going to import something, it's totally different last 4 digits. So your importing 10-digit code is called a Schedule B number. It's called a Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the United States. And if you're exporting, your 10-digit code is called a Schedule B number. Just to confuse things. I mean, it is a little bit complicated. But we can help you identify your products, identify the tariff associated with your product. And there's even a way for you to ask the government to say, will you bless this? Will you tell me what exactly is the tariff I'm going to have to pay for this? What's the classification code on it? And once they bless you, you're stuck with it. I'll tell you that. So sometimes good to get, sometimes you might want to determine it on your own, just saying. Some of you might have heard of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. This is another thing that we're all subject to as Americans. US companies cannot bribe foreign officials. You might think, well, of course, I'm not going to bribe anybody. What about your distributors in the country that live there who typically bribe foreign officials? They cannot do that either because they're representing the US company. And so we teach on this act. We also teach you about, we have a whole day on due diligence and we have a whole day on ethics. So it changes the game when you're doing business globally. And so we want to make sure that you understand that. So just wanted to share that with you. Most important message here is that you need a written compliance program. That you need to have this in your company, that you train everybody on, because if you're ever audited and you made a mistake and sold something to a denied parties, somebody on the denied parties list, or you accidentally didn't code something right, if you can show that you have a compliance program and you've done training on it and you have somebody who's monitoring it, you have a much better job of getting a slap on the wrist than you do getting a major, major fine. So we'd like to help you build these compliance programs. It's the #1 thing we're asked in the World Trade Center. So just wanted to share that it's a common problem, even with the largest of companies that we've helped and the smallest ones. So we want to help you succeed in this area, and it's relatively easy to do if you just know the rules. Okay, pricing. If you don't get paid for your product, your export, then it's a gift, right? We don't want that. So let me tell you how to get paid. So first off, you got to think about how to price this. Pricing is crucial. Pricing will also help you determine whether or not your product's going to be, your intellectual property might be stolen. Sometimes it's the price that really matters. If you're priced well within the market range of a country, you're more likely not to get the product stolen of intellectual property. So pricing considerations are going to help you get either a large market share, or if you want to be priced high and just get the quality market share, like you want to have you want to enter a market to say, we're a US made product, quality matters to us, we're going to be at a higher price. That's one strategy. But you're more likely to be, your intellectual property may be stolen in that sense. Not always, but it's just your pricing really does matter when you're doing global business. So here are some strategies to think about. You want to make sure you're looking at your landed cost, which is everything included in the global business transaction. We talked about product modifications. We talked about changing the labels and the colors and the marketing materials. All that comes with costs. Then we also talked about additional shipping costs and having to hire a freight forwarder and a customs broker, and all of these things come with extra fees and extra costs. So by the time you add all that up, you may not have a big enough margin to make it make sense in that market. That's why it's so important for your pricing to be appropriate, not only for the market and your competition, but also for your bottom line. And so we'll help you with those strategies. These are the kind of things that go into a sales contract. I know it's a quick list, but these are some things that we would look at to see that you want to include in your pricing. Make sure that you're including all of these elements so that you're pricing them appropriately. Now, there are many ways to charge. There are many ways to charge. I had it on silent. There are many ways to charge your customers. You can, I'll be honest, a lot of US companies do US dollars upfront. That's what I see most of the time. How competitive is that? If you're making all the risk on your buyer, they're assuming all risk. If they're paying you in cash, US dollars, in advance of getting the product, in the hopes that you're going to send it, that is not a competitive position. It is, we are blessed to be able to charge it most of the time. We are blessed to do that. But it is not a very competitive position. There are a lot of other tools where you can actually promise your customer that these products are already on the ship. You can cross-check the documents. You can get an inspection of this shipment before it comes to you. You can work out open accounts and terms. Of course, you'll want to do that with someone you trust. But all of this gives you some different options just to be a little bit more competitive. Because remember, they're looking at your product in the US versus a local product that's right there they can touch and feel and buy in local currency. So also consider charging in their currency. We have foreign exchange providers that can help you do something called hedging a currency. So that basically says that they can work out in a contract what that dollar exchange will be for you at that point in time. And so that allows you to sleep at night because you know what you're going to get. So focus on just giving a little bit of flexibility there for your customer to also have some skin. You have some skin in the game, they have some skin in the game, and here are some options for you to do. You can also do letters of credit. They're less popular now than they were, but it's where you get both banks involved, both in the US and in the foreign country, and the banks will guarantee the sale goes through. So just wanted to share some options. There's also something called credit insurance. And credit insurance actually you can buy here, and then 80% or 90% of your accounts receivable are insured. So even if they default on payment, you can still get paid. So there's lots of options just for you to give a little bit of wiggle room in terms of making yourself more competitive. Export financing, I think the one I wanted to point out here is the Small Business Administration offers loans to do that product modification, maybe your plant modification, maybe you have some additional expenses around ITAR or other things. They can give you loans for that. It's called a working capital loan. And then import financing. There's less options for you importers, but I do think that there are some options. You should talk to your bank about giving you loans on accounts receivables. So finally, the last point I wanted to mention is the after-sales service. This is that customer service. I mentioned, though, that it's the first thing you need to think about when you're trying to figure out your sales channel. How much effort and time do I want to spend with the customer post-sale? What if there's a warranty? Do I want the distributor to spend most of the time, or do I want to focus on that? So you need to look at your language, your time zone, whether or not you can carry inventory in the country, how much is the warehousing of that inventory, that sort of thing. So look at all of that to see what should you do with your customer. How much effort do I want to spend with the customer on the post-sale, or do I want my distributor to spend with the customer on the post-sale? So all of that matters in terms of your sales channel. And then, of course, protocol and cross-cultural issues. Probably one of the most important things to remember when doing international business is that you have to have great relationships. Business is based on relationships. And so in order to build great relationships, it's important to know something about their culture, right? You know that maybe the first 4 meetings are social in nature. They're not even talking about the business contract. But you're learning all about their culture and their history and their tastes and their food. All of that really matters. And it's a longer process than it is here in the US. So that's important to note. Those are the 8 steps. I know that was a broad brush stroke in an hour or less. Yeah, a little bit less than an hour. But I wanted to say that there are many aspects of doing international business. We have about a full day or a half-day class on each of the topics I've talked about today. So I've got a booth downstairs where you can pick up more information about our training or about becoming a member of the World Trade Center. But really, our whole mission is to see Colorado companies succeed globally. And so whatever we can do to support you in doing that, whether it's importing, exporting, setting up global operations, hiring foreign nationals, whatever it is, doing a joint venture with someone, we want to help you do that. And we have a team to help you do that. We also offer consulting practices at the World Trade Center. So if you're looking for support in helping to select a new market, find ways to promote your product or service, or even fix a problem that you've already experienced globally, we can try to help. So we at the World Trade Center are a nonprofit. We're all about getting companies to meet each other and share best practices. And so we help companies sell goods, services, and knowledge globally, or buy those things. I mentioned who we are as an organization. Really, our sole purpose is to help our customers succeed globally. Our mission is really to serve all industries, not just the ones that are making a good, but all industries of Colorado. So we've been operating in the market for 31 years. We've taught over 35,000 people do international business. It's what we do, and we do it well. So I hope you'll connect with us to get some support there. Our vision, we're much more about imports. We're much more than just imports and exports. We're about really strengthening our economy through global business. And trade really matters. It matters in many different aspects. And so we're here to advocate for trade and to also help companies appreciate what trade can do for their bottom line. We offer all types of services, as I mentioned. Education, events, we do about 100 events a year. We have some online, so there's lots of ways to access our programming. We're building a new campus in Rhino in Denver, right on the 38th and Blake campus, or 38th and Blake train stop, right on the A line going out to the airport. So the first stop out of Union Station to the airport, we're building a brand new World Trade Center. And we hope this becomes a representation of how Denver and Colorado especially are becoming much more globally recognized and connected and globally conscious. So we invite Colorado Springs companies to take part in this exciting new development that we're building, and also find ways to connect globally. This will be a place where all global companies convene and gather on a daily basis. This is another view of it, but it is an exciting new venture that we should be opening in the end of 2020 and breaking ground here in the next month or two. So pretty exciting. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share today. Thank you for your time, and thanks for having me. Appreciate it.